Welcome everyone to another episode of Hope Studios. My name is Georgie Taylor and this is Andy Kennedy, and we've been just gathering together with different guests to be really sharing some of what God is doing in this season. We're aware of the crazy times that we're living in, and we felt challenged to be sharing some testimonies of what God is doing. So we have an amazing guest with us today, so we're excited to hear what she's going to be saying.
We do indeed have an amazing guest from probably my favourite continent in the world.
It would be, hey?
It would be. I think I was born in that same continent. Taryn, it's great to have you with us here today. Tell us a little bit about where in this great continent you grew up. And
Great. I am Taryn, and I am from South Africa. And I was born and raised just south of Durban. I moved around quite a bit, but I was born just about an hour south of Durban, South Africa, which is the best part, I think. It's very mild in the winter. It's always sunny. We have hot and dry winters, which is amazing. So I miss that.
it's a beautiful country.
Thank you. It is. I do miss it.
I have been there. Flying into Cape Town, they say, is one of the most amazing kind of entries into a nation, isn't it?
Cape Town is gorgeous, yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible, but you're a little bit further north in Durban.
I am a little bit further north, just south of the Mozambican border is Durban, yeah.
So is English your first language?
It is my first language.
It is your first language?
Yes, my family are all British heritage, so I was raised speaking English, but I learned Afrikaans in school, and a very tiny little bit of Zulu as well.
Is that the language with the clicking?
Yes, well, Xhosa is more well known as the clicking one, but Zulu has the same amount of clicks. It just has less words with those clicks in it. So it still has clicks, but not as many as Xhosa.
Wow.
Very good.
Yeah, got it in there. So good. And tell us about your family, Taryn.
My family, I have a sister who's still in South Africa. She lives in Johannesburg with her husband. And my mother and stepfather live here in England, which they moved here about 2 or 3 years ago now. So we're all together. And I'm married to a wonderful man named Mike, and I have a daughter, 6-year-old daughter called Emily.
Oh, so
Now, you're quite a mixture of marriage, because Mike is not from this nation.
No, he's not. He is American. He's from Washington State. So my daughter has got 3 nationalities. She's British, South African, and American.
Wonderful.
Yeah, she's very international.
Yeah, so cool.
Good old YWAM, all these international people we are.
Yeah, so
That's a lot more travel to keep in touch with the rallies, though, isn't it?
Yes, we've done a lot of America lately. We haven't done South Africa quite as much. We were married in South Africa, Mike and I, which was lovely. We got married in the winter, and on my wedding day, it was 28 degrees Celsius on my wedding day in the middle of winter. So it was very mild. And I have been back about 3 years ago now, but Mike has not been back since our wedding. So we are long overdue a trip to South Africa. But of course, with COVID and everything, it's difficult to travel still internationally. So we'll hopefully get there soon.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, so good. And tell us a bit about yourself, Taryn, because you were here quite a few years ago, weren't you?
I was.
What year did you first come here? And then tell us a bit of your journey from there.
So I arrived in 2006 to do my DTS here at the King's Lodge. And then I staffed 2 and I led 2 DTSs over the 4 or 5 years.
Now, can I just come? DTS, that we in YWAM love our little abbreviations, don't we?
DTS is Discipleship Training School, which is our main entry-level school for when you arrive into YWAM, you have to do a DTS to kind of enter into the organization.
Okay, so you did that first, and then you stayed on to help make it happen for others.
I did, yes. I did my own, and then I came back the next year, and I staffed 2, and then I led 2 as well. Up until 2011 was the last one that I led. And then I met my husband in 2010, and after we were married, we went to Kona, Hawaii, to the Youth with a Mission location there for 6 months, which was very, very different and amazing. Hard work, but it was good to see a different side of the mission, different experience of it. You know, obviously a very big campus, lots of people, lots of opportunities. And at the time, my friend was pioneering a new YWAM location in Reading, which is just outside of London. And he had asked us before we left to go to Kona to pray about joining him in pioneering, and we felt that was right. So we got back here in 2013, September, And then we went straight down to Reading, near London, to help pioneer the mission there, which we did for almost 3 years.
3 years,
3
wow.
years, yeah.
And what was that? Was that mainly working in ministries there? What did that kind of look like, your time there?
It was a small team. There were only 5 of us, 6 of us. And so it was mostly working with other organizations. We did a lot of volunteer work. The main focus for most of us was working with a rehab center, rehabilitation center called Yellow Manor Christian Rehab Center. And it's for men. So the men in my team mostly did work with them, about Bible studies and different ministries with the men in the rehab center. And then I did different work with Salvation Army, and there was a churches in Reading drop-in center for the homeless. I only was on staff there full time for about a year before I had my daughter, and so I personally wasn't full time in ministry because I was a full time mom for most of it.
Yeah.
But our team had we did evangelism and many things between us. We were quite busy as a team. Yeah.
Oh,
Now, Taryn,
that's so
is this
cool.
quite a dream fulfilled from your earlier years? Is this something that was on your radar a long time?
So yes, it was part of I wanted it to be part of my story. Here on base, I found if I wasn't on a mission trip, I didn't have a huge amount of interaction with non-Christians. Partly my own doing, living on base here, didn't have my own car. I could get very, very much in a bubble here, and my life would just be very much the King's Lodge. And I wouldn't go out by myself and do evangelism, and so I felt that I was missing a part of being a missionary, really, and actually getting to know some non-Christians naturally. And so I felt when people would share stories about meeting people naturally as part of their life as opposed to an event or a mission trip, I felt something in me stirring. And when Matt, my friend, approached me about joining YWAM Reading, I felt like actually this is a part of my story as a missionary that I want to explore a bit more and try out a bit more. So I must say it was hard work. It was harder than I thought. I thought it would be a bit easier, a bit more like, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but it was hard trying to, relationships take time.
Yeah.
And so it takes a while. Friendships take time, and there's no quick open road with people. You have to invest in them, and so it took longer than I thought it was going to. But I must say, especially through having Emily and becoming a mom, I met a lot of non-Christian moms at baby groups and play groups, and I still have a relationship with some of them today. So it was
so
definitely
cool.
It was meaningful, a really meaningful time for me in my missionary journey.
Good. And you've been involved in, quite a couple of different pioneering kind of initiatives, haven't you? Yes. Like when I think of you, I always think of the mobile DTS that you pioneered. So tell us a little bit about that. So
I felt early on in my YWAM journey, I felt God talk to me about doing a mobile DTS through Europe. Not specifically a backpackers DTS, which can be different, which is when you tend to focus more on backpackers who are tourists themselves. Mine was more of just being mobile and moving around Europe, Western Europe. And I worked at pioneering that and getting it off the ground, and we did that in 2011. And the idea was to mix the lecture phase and the outreach phase. And normally on a DTS, you have the lecture phase first for 3 months on a location, and then you go on a mission trip for 3 months. And I felt to mix those. So in week 3, we left for Europe. And we did on location. We were on location for about a month, usually, and we do like a week of lectures and a week of outreach, and then a week of lectures, and mix it up a bit.
Wow!
And so the students were learning as they go, and doing a bit of mission and then a bit of lecture, and it was good. It was a good time. It was hard work. Being on the road for 6 months and living out of a backpack for 6 months, and traveling around Europe. But all my trainees were North American, and so for them just to experience Europe. Solely from a cultural point of view was amazing. But then to interact with the European people.
So it was a good awareness-raising sort of experience for that particular group of young people.
It was. Again, it was challenging. DTSs are always challenging in terms of for the trainees themselves, because they go through a lot of growth and a lot of encountering with God, a lot of personal, having to ask some questions of themselves and have a journey with God, and doing that while an outreach setting,
Yeah.
possibly sleeping on the floor or living in, it was a bit harder on them, I think, than
Yeah.
it would be ordinarily, because they had the
Yeah,
outreach
for
setting
sure.
and they were going through the personal stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it was a lot for them. Bless them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you've done so many of these DTSs, I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So are you still convinced about discipleship?
Oh, yes, very much so. Very much convinced about discipleship. I think the model we have here is a very powerful one. Being able to, especially for the lecture phase, being able to commit 3 months of your life full time to this process. God can work in any situation, and any bit we give him, God will work. Even if we can only give him a Sunday afternoon or something, he will work with what we give him. But I find that people who have set aside that time and said, I will commit myself and my finances for these 6 months, and they arrive almost they expect something,
Yeah.
even if they don't know what they expect yet, they're expecting something. And God,
Yeah.
because he's God and he's so faithful, he usually shows up, and he always shows up, but how people experience that and how much they let him change them is different, a different
Yeah.
experience for everyone. But God always shows up and changes people if they'll let him
Yeah.
work in them,
So good.
So if there are some people listening in today's Hope Studio, there's a little message here that a challenge maybe for consider giving
Yes.
that sort of time out.
I would always recommend anybody of any age and any journey. We've had people in their 60s and 70s come. We've had
Yeah.
people sell homes, in different countries and come. It's not only a young person's game.
Yeah.
Even though we are Youth with a Mission, it's for anybody.
Yeah.
And I would definitely encourage to take the time and the leave the space for God, because, as I said, God always is faithful and he always shows up, and there's always something of God here and for you if you're willing to commit yourself to it, and not just your time, but commit your heart and your soul to it,
Yeah.
because you can arrive and go through the motions, but there's something in you that has to really say yes.
Yeah,
When God
for
asks
sure.
of you, you have to say yes to be transformed,
So good. And there's something of it as well, isn't there, of really taking that time to allow God to move and work in your life, but also to kind of encounter his heart for the nations,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
the people that you talk about your mobile DTS around Europe, and I'm sure you've been to many other places, and you've seen people's lives be changed
Yeah.
through the team's obedience, right? So, yeah.
Of course, yeah, and that's the other part. We don't just, our DTS is not just about the lecture phase. It's, we're YWAM to know God and make him known. And so the making God known part is crucial and is part of our DNA. We're a missionary organization, and that missional part, that trip, the local evangelism throughout your school, not just 3 months at the end, but throughout the school, but especially that missional trip at the end, the outreach phase, as we call it, it can be life-changing. And of course, you're transformed more yourself as well.
Yeah, I was about to say
you
that.
can't go through what we go through on outreach,
Yeah.
and not be changed. And so it is such a beautiful part of our mission. And to see, especially people who haven't traveled or who haven't seen how people live, and to go to all these countries and see them, see how people live, and to see them so often hear about God for the first time. Or we went to Albania, and it hadn't been long since Albania had been opened up. And, it wasn't right as it opened up, but it hadn't been open for very long.
Yeah.
Because Albania was, I think, the first atheist nation, declared atheist. And, to see people walking around who never even heard the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
And to work with churches who are doing it. And to see people, we had someone get baptized in the sea, in the ocean in Albania, in the middle of winter. They got baptized, and just to see people hear that the name of Jesus and the freedom that comes with that, and the love and the everything that comes with knowing Jesus.
Yeah.
It really is. It's something special to see.
It's so good.
And as a
isn't
leader,
it?
to see your trainees step out in that, and it's always a bit nerve-wracking doing the evangelism part, and to see your trainees step out and have people respond positively, and have people ask for prayer, and all those beautiful things that we see is really.
Taryn, there's a leader
so
who used to be based out of our missional community here in King's Lodge called Paul Hopkins. And I think Paul wrote a book, and he said something interesting. It's just what you're saying is reminding me. It's like that mission is a missing ingredient of discipleship today, and maybe even in our local church community context, it's an aspect But that's coming very strong from you, that
Yeah.
our getting out there
Yeah.
to experience other nations, cultures, stepping out is really important
It
to
is.
our growth.
And it's part of, I mean, it's the Great Commission. It's the command Jesus gave us. And it's not just that, it's the greatest commandment, to love our neighbor, to love God and to love our neighbor.
Yeah.
And those, Jesus himself said the first commandment, the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And those two things do go hand in hand. And I think we have lost something of that in the church, or our expression of our Christianity has become more focused on our personal growth.
Yeah.
And we've lost something, I think, of the outreach part, of the sharing. And Jesus, he tells us to. Everyone, not just missionaries who are called to mission. Every Christian everywhere has been given the same commission.
Yeah.
To spread the good news.
And isn't it amazing, like just picking up on something you said earlier of, I love it how God meets us when we do that as well, like in our obedience. Like I remember, but on my DTS, and because sometimes this can seem a bit scary, right? When we talk about missions and we talk about going to tell people about Jesus, and I know it was something for me that I'd never really done, before coming here, but just remembering how, like I remember the first time I had to preach, and I was petrified, like absolutely petrified. But the way the Lord came through when I said yes to him, and he radically changed me as I took that step of faith and was obedient to give away what he'd given me. Yeah. And I just love that because it's so powerful, isn't it? It's so
I remember
powerful.
In the Philippines, we were doing house-to-house evangelism, and we walked through it was a poorer community. And we walked into this kind of, it was almost like a market square, like a meeting of roads. And we approached, and there's lots of people milling about, and the translator turned to me and said, "You preach now?" And I was like, I had been given no warning, zero idea. He was just like, "You preach now." And I was like, okay. And it was only my second mission trip ever. I was 24, and I was terrified.
Yeah.
But thank the Lord for translation, because as I would say something, I would have preached a very simple gospel message, but as I would say something, as he was translating, the next thought was coming to my mind from God,
Yeah.
and I could order my thoughts from him and
Wow.
order the way it would go because of the pause of translation, and that's the first time I'd ever done that, and I just, to a crowd of people, I just, no microphone, nothing, just, preached the gospel and went about our way,
Yeah.
But it was terrifying.
Yeah.
But I came out of it just glowing, like so thankful to God's faithfulness.
Wow. So cool.
And the privilege it is to be used in that. And I don't know if anybody was saved through it because we didn't really ask people. But I don't know what came of that. But the privilege it is to be part of someone's, even if it's just a seed, be part of that journey. To say maybe one day in heaven to meet someone who said, "I was standing in that market square." And I heard you preach, and your words from God were part of my journey. And that's such a privilege,
It's so good. And we never know, do we? No. Like sometimes we hear the feedback and the testimonies, but many times I feel like in our obedience, we might never hear, but actually we have to trust the Lord with the seeds that he's planted, right?
Yeah, and just be obedient in what he asks us to do. Yeah.
Wow, come on, love that. So good.
Wow, so you've come all this way from South Africa, married an American, living here. Your parents have followed you.
They have, yes.
Cool.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, very special.
And here you are being a blessing here. And then encouraging us to go to other countries, I'm hearing.
Yeah, encourage everyone, if you can, to take the time and, make it happen. Find a way to commit to a DTS, or if you can't do a DTS, to find some expression of growth and mission in your personal walk with God, definitely.
Awesome. So Taryn, you've talked a lot about, what DTS is and how, if there's people watching, obviously, there's so many different discipleship tools in this day and age. Yeah. But if someone, for someone, DTS might be really stirring on their hearts right now, like how could they get involved? Like, what does that look like?
Well, that's a great question, Georgie. If you want to be involved in DTS, we would say come here and do it at the King's Lodge, but of course if you're unable or would like to travel somewhere else across the world, YWAM is an international organization. We are everywhere, and so I would encourage you to just Google YWAM, and we have a website that you can put in the location you'd like to do it. We have focus DTSs that focus on specific things or specific threads or themes or all kinds of things. We have many, many types of DTSs in YWAM. So you can Google all the types we have on the website. Or of course come here, or if God lays a specific place on your heart, you can Google that specific location. But also to say, if you are unable to do a DTS, so finding 6 months out of your life to set aside is difficult for you right now, I would encourage you to turn to your pastor or your vicar, or your church leader, and ask them if the church has any kind of discipleship training or an internship or a gap year or whatever they call it, to focus on your discipleship, but hand in hand with that, the mission side as well, and to ask where you can be plugged in mission and in growth. And if your church isn't running one, they may have something, another church or another organization in the area that may be able to help. But don't let your time commitment stop you from being involved. Even if it needs to be part-time, I would strongly encourage you to find a way. This is an important part in your growth, so I really encourage you to find a way to focus on your discipleship, your walk with Jesus, but also the reaching out to the world and to telling them the good news of Jesus.
Awesome. Thank you, Taryn. And yeah, we want to encourage you. I think Taryn said it. It's been amazing to have you sharing with us today. But guys, whether your heart is stirred for your local area, for nationally, for internationally, missions, it's the all and the every. You don't have to go super far to engage and see God's kingdom come. We're all called to this, aren't we? With whatever sphere of society that God has put us in, right? But this is just another way to engage, and our hearts is really to see people equipped and empowered and just sent out to the nations to see God's kingdom come in those places. So yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us and for impacting us. I don't know about you, but are you stirred like I am to be shaken up, be willing to be shaken up? A young lady who leaves home and country, not knowing what she's going to end up doing or being. And reminds me of Abraham, just leaving country there. But Taryn is leaving a legacy, and it's still going on, it's still rippling on. I wonder what legacy you and I are willing to step out and to begin. And let's be shaken up in these days that we're living in, to make a difference, to be part of that bigger story of what God is doing in the world today. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Again, engage in our social media. Give us feedback. Tell us how this has encouraged you. We'd love to hear from you.